Greetings, everybody. We've gathered around the table again today. Well, most of us. We have the fill-in...
I'm back.
Number 5 of the...
Four
of the Pokey Factor.
How many episodes have you done there, Maureen? Maybe just one?
No, he's done
Done
2
or
at least.
Okay,
3 or
okay.
4, something
Just
like
curious, yeah.
that. Counting this one.
It's been a while, so happy you're back. For
I
sure.
am back.
Yeah, and to kick it off, let's see what you're carrying.
Courtesy of the person who isn't here. A knife that's so weird, I love it.
ZT850. Yeah, it's funky, but
It's a neat one for sure.
Absolutely.
be nicer if it wasn't blue carbon fiber. But
Kind of dig that.
what are
It's
you
got
carrying?
a lot of schmutz on it as well.
Oh, also a ZT.
Yeah, I've got my 456.
Also a lot of schmutz.
Not as much as my cricketer last week.
That was pretty sure.
Yeah, that's true. Pocket clips wearing nicely on that guy.
Yeah, getting some nice wear pattern also on the pivot.
Yeah.
Broke up the Cold Steel Ultimate Hunter XHP.
Also schmutzy.
Also schmutzy. Yeah, I really love Cold Steel's XHP. They do a really nice job. I've got some Spydercos as well with that same steel, and I might even say that Cold Steel's is a little bit nicer. That's, yeah. But,
Fair enough.
All right. A real oldie. Spyderco military whip Digicam handles. Yeah.
Where's your schmutz? You're the odd man out.
I know, it's weird. And it's a coated blade.
It's a coated blade. It's hidden.
lick your knife a little bit. Like, it's get some smudge for the camera here.
I know where my knife's been. I don't want to lick it.
It's probably a good call. So today we have a really fancy treat being brought to you by Spyderco. Coming out of one of their fancy pouches with the gold spider on it, we have the Paysan.
Ooh.
I don't even...
Focus.
Yeah, and it's to the point where the black pouches sometimes need super fancy. Sometimes you're like, why does this deserve a black pouch? But I can honestly say I think this knife definitely deserves a black pouch.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This guy's using S90V for the blade. It's got a one-piece machined out integral titanium handle and using really nice little ball bearing washers in there for buttery smooth action on that guy.
Is there ball bearings or is it just washers?
Ball bearing washers, yeah.
Okay.
I double checked on that.
Interesting. That adds to the smoothness of it, for sure. Because when you're looking at the top of it, it's very exposed when you've got the knife open, and you can very clearly see the bronze. But yeah, you have to look a little deeper to actually see the bearings running on it at the same time, right? So, the successor to the Nirvana.
Designed by Peter Rassenti. So at an overall length of 8.74 inches, it would take about 20 of these to stretch out to the length of the longest moray eel at about 15 feet.
Nice.
It kind of looks like a moray eel, too.
A little bit, yeah.
That little snubby. Yeah, it's a little... Yeah.
Sitting in the coral reef, just waiting to just snatch something up a little bit.
If I saw like an animated Spyderco knife swimming at me in the ocean, I'd be kind of scared.
How many?
20.
20 of them. Yeah. That's worse than piranhas, dude. Like, it's seriously just a bunch of Paysans.
A school of Paysans coming at you.
Death by Paysan.
Yeah, just like them little fucking flashy fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, cut you right to the bone.
Oh, yeah.
And if you were to take all those 20 knives and crush them up into a ball, it would equal about the weight of the largest ostrich egg. Or 20 of them would equal about the largest ostrich egg at 91.36 ounces and 4.4 ounces per knife.
That is a whole lot of egg.
Yeah,
That's like a surprising amount of egg.
it is. 5-pound egg.
We'll put that up on the Instagram story of how that tastes later on, too. But, yeah.
We could feed an army. Stampede breakfasts are coming.
Yeah, just go for the into the pan.
That was horrible. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what did Joe learn up today?
The Canadian knife maker.
That's the little tidbit that all of us have kind of glanced over.
One of us.
A little bit surprising, but there's dozens of us. Yeah, there's the does a lot of really interesting looking custom work. This is only the second collaboration with the Spyderco, Nirvana being the first.
Yeah.
Both integrals, overall very nicely done. I mean,
That it is.
definitely on the high end for what Spyderco puts out.
Yeah. One of the impressive things is with it being the one piece of titanium, the machining that they did and how thin that they were able to get the sides, but there's no actual sharp edges. Like they went over every corner, every edge, and chamfered everything nicely.
Overall chamfering is awesome. I believe even including the Spyderco
Yes.
hole is not even as crisp, and that's the one knock on Tai Chung sometimes is their sharp Spidey holes, and even it's
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
The profiling on it's almost reminiscent of I think, a group favorite, the Sleech Bowie. In
Yeah,
some
a little
respects.
bit, yeah. And I know you and I both own one of those, which is awesome. And
And
two
are
guys
both
sitting at the
deeply
table.
in love with
yeah,
it.
yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Oh God, no.
But yeah, and even the same mirror with the stonewash finish on the blade,
yeah.
that's reminiscent of that as well. They do an awesome job on that.
I think that's why I like the look of it so much when I first saw it. Is like, bam.
Yeah. And it is definitely has some similarities with the Nirvana, but definitely some new additions. We've got a sheep's foot style blade rather than the original.
Yeah, it's
blade.
definitely its own knife. It's not just Peter Rassenti rehashing the Nirvana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's nice to see. Is some guys you're like, yep, that looks like the last knife, and like the last knife before that. So
The speaking of the blade finish, just briefly going back to that, the finish that they did on the handle, I personally much prefer this to the Nirvana. They did away with the sandblasting with the hard milled lines for that bright contrast. Instead, they did more of a stone wash.
see, and it's weird too. Me being the man that likes boring stuff, I actually dug the Nirvana
I'm gonna completely agree with you here.
with what they did on the mirror polished cross hatch as well as the tumbled finish.
I like that. I just didn't like how sandblasty it was. That was the
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the lines, but more
No,
the surface texture.
I like the lines.
Yeah,
There was a nice touch.
I
mean,
think the lines
like this
really
too.
showed off the integral design, honestly. Because like you see them carry on all the way across the back in
Yeah.
continuous fashion. It makes it pop a little bit more than this. Because first looking, you don't necessarily know that that's integral, except for the lack of screws.
But I will say the way that they contoured it too, it does seamlessly turn into one
Yes.
piece
Yeah.
there as well. So it will be more noticeable.
It doesn't
than-
pop until it's in motion.
Well, I was going to say things like the Anthem. And the
Yeah.
Anthem with a very, very straight spine, nothing against it because also a beautiful knife. But with a very straight spine, you do have to kind of get it onto that up and down
Yeah.
vertical view to realize that it's an integral and go, oh, the cool type of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas this does have this nice contoured flow that one angle leads to another angle. And
It's
yeah.
very polygonal in that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Like just the light passing over it. Really.
Well, they've got this really nice contoured curve.
Yeah, I held it from the worst end to show that off.
But yeah, how they bring it up from the blade, they come up, keep some height in the midsection, then they taper back off and then trail out. Like it's a nice sweeping curve, and yeah, it catches the light in kind of an interesting way.
And the curves that this thing has been contoured to somewhat justifies the pretty steep price point for what you're asking. There's a lot going on this knife that a 2D picture does not justify when you're looking at the contours and the milling and the precision of what they've done with this knife, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, all for everything else we're going to say tonight, you definitely need to hold it in hand before you make a decision whether you like it or hate it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
And I mean, right here is the
that's kind of a sweet spot, right?
piece
Like,
de resistance on the.
Machining.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything. This is potentially something that could just be hotspot crazy and it still finds a way to sink in
Exactly.
nice. I will also say, in comparison to a lot of other Spydercos on the market, the footprint, very reasonable. For some, a Spyderco that's known to have high Cobra Hood style blades on them.
like just a little bit.
Yeah, they were able to keep the hump pretty minimal.
Again, like the smocks and some of their other designs that they've been releasing as of late, for sure. So I can appreciate what they're doing there for the better pocket ergos. So
Despite this thing being really, really nicely made and really clean edges all around and stuff like that, we're all nitpicky, and there's definitely things that we can pick out about it. I'll jump off just first with the awkwardness of my hand size and whatnot, and why I find this thing awkward for the ergonomics. Is either I want to grip it for far enough up that this point here becomes a bit of a hot spot on my index finger, or else I'm going back off of that and it's the weird 3-finger grip for me.
So, surprise, surprise, Nigel's double XL hand doesn't fit a large knife.
Yeah.
Not quite. Not
So-
quite.
Common issue.
Yeah, and I will admit that this second little spot is going to be a make or break. I personally really, really love the way that it sits, and we were talking about that earlier. Probably for a medium or even a like large XL type of.
Yeah.
But
For me, honestly, this spot, if it weren't as well machined as it was, I really mind it.
I agree.
As it
Yeah.
stands, I don't mind it.
Yeah, like all the edges are
Like-
subtle enough that unless you have...
Unconsciously
Big fingers.
just grabbing it, don't notice it. Paying attention to it, I do notice it, but it's like no discomfort.
Inconsequential for what you're looking at.
Yes, exactly.
the difference between the CRKT Seismic
Yeah.
with that same
Yeah.
issue on the sharp finger choils compared to a much nicer machined piece,
Yeah.
right?
Much more cleanly done.
Yeah.
For me, it's the taper of the handle. This is going to come down to personal preference.
Yes,
but
So again, ergos, but in the opposite direction.
yeah. So for me, this feels right here is super, super comfortable. As soon as I factor in these two fingers, this knife feels kind of awkward. Now, this is coming from somebody who doesn't like Texas toothpick patterns for slip joints for this very reason. The fact that it tapers out. I wish this had some more meat to it. I wish it came down not necessarily as aggressively as this does, but I wish there was something more just for your hand to hang on to.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I don't like how thin it tapers out.
And it's weird that his
I
hands are
agree as well.
basically between ours, and he's
Love it.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something I mentioned before recording as well is when you're getting down to the slim part of it, it's very reminiscent of a 940 Osborne.
I think, yeah.
When you
And the
pull
point
that
of
out.
I
of
like-
contrast is the front end, though.
That's just it. I like my 940, maybe because it's more consistent. Maybe that's just throwing me off.
And one of the complaints about the 940 is you don't feel like you can do quite as hard work because of how small it is. And I think for me personally, they solved that by giving you a bigger, thicker index finger placement.
You know,
Sure,
I've
Take
not
that,
actually
right?
experienced that with my 940. Like I've torn down fences with that
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
And it's for whatever reason, I assume because Osborne was a genius or something, it just felt good in my hand. This still feels good, but it's just it didn't decide which end it wanted to be consistent
yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So it's this comfortable, this comfortable. It's together. It's just a little bit awkward.
So speaking of
Flip that around, Wayne. I know it's been a while, but Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry. I swear this has never happened before.
yeah, that's what they all say. Speaking of consistency, for me, this feels like it's kind of tacked on. I'm really not a fan of the standard Spyderco spoon clip for what, a sale price of around 700, 750 in that range. I don't think a spoon clip is appropriate. It's
Yeah, and we were off camera talking about this guy as a comparison point and comparing the price point, and you're getting a nice 3D machine titanium custom clip that fits the knife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even when you're talking about the machining on the titanium backspacer on this and everything involved, I'm not saying that there's the equal amount of machining, but there's no shortage of machining on this.
Yes.
For sure.
and it sucks to say, but even a deep carry wire clip would have just been something on this knife. I mean, they did it with a Sleech buoy. They've done it with a lot of the higher end sort of Spydercos. It feels very tacked on. Yeah, just kind of weird that you're going to pay that much for a knife and you end up with such a basic looking clip.
One of the other negatives that I have is along the lines of the aesthetics is the handle looks really, really nice and the blade looks really, really nice, but I find they're misproportioned for each other.
It's like one of those caricatures that you get at like the sketch artists on the
Yeah.
boardwalk sort of thing with the like oversized head and the tiny bodies. Either would look fine.
Yeah.
Well, and when you were talking about like that looks good and that looks good, and when you covered them up, you've got a 450 or you've got a 940 Osborne, and then when you look at this, you've got a sheep's foot Griptilian, and it's like you put those two knives together,
very much
and that's
so.
what you're sitting on there, right? So
We were looking at it today. The Sheepster Griptilian is basically
So
that.
close.
It's basically that blade
It's-
shape.
yeah.
It's like
And just to jump on the complaining about the pocket clip bandwagon here, I agree with Joseph completely here. However, I can live with it. Basically, it works. I can live with it.
it's functional.
However, I've found that if I go into a more choke-uppy sort of grip, that digs into my hand.
The front of the spoon
It's not a hot spot, it's just a warm spot.
might become a hot spot after a bit
But-
of working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's really nice and smooth.
Too many weird transitions.
That pokes. This way, this way, this way.
That way.
Ah.
Follow
He's
the logo.
learning.
Yeah. Anything else for negatives?
well, you were talking about the weights as well. The front heavy blade, the proportion of the weight itself,
Yeah.
because of the thickness of the spine, which she is beefy.
Yeah.
We were doing a comparison on everything on the table, and
That's a 4mm thick blade.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a joke.
This is thinner, although it's also very, very nose heavy.
so
Yeah.
not saying that this couldn't be a good slicer, because I own the sheep's foot Griptilian, and with some edge modification and things like that, you can still make it cut really, really nice. But it's going to definitely not slice as nice as a standard Spyderco has been known to, because of how thick
Well,
that blade is.
And they went from the Nirvana, which was a hollow grind, right, to this. It's a bit of a
Yeah,
big jump, really.
yeah.
Change in geometry.
Yeah.
And even the height of the blade comes into play, because I believe the Nirvana was a wider blade as well, so it had more room to have that taper, even without the thick spine of what this has, because I don't think the Nirvana was as thick as this bad boy is. One other thing that we were going to dabble on is because of the price point, I would like to see things a little bit better than the off-centered blade that I know and love from my 940 Osborne.
It's this is just under a millimeter off center, but it's $730 to get something like this. I think-
Canadian, US, or Canadian pricing, yeah.
Yes, Canadian. It's an expensive knife, and you kind of expect perfect centering, especially when the handle has to be completely 3D machined anyway. It feels like, take the extra time, make sure that it's going to be bang frickin' on, because this isn't it could work as a workhorse, but it's not a workhorse. This is a show knife.
And that's kind of bringing to a question I had. I realize what this is and what this is for, but what is this for? Like, what would you use this for? Because every knife's meant to be used, right?
Yeah.
So it's thick enough and tiny in the butt enough that it's just kind of a little bit in that weird sort of no man's land.
And I think it really is kind of in that, like, you can use it hard if you choose to, you can use it gentlemanly if you choose to, and I think that's exactly where it wants to be.
Yeah.
Is.
in that flexible.
But it's
Right
it's
on the
awkward
fence.
in that way, like a teenager, not like a balance.
It had a growth spurt and the rest
Yeah,
hadn't grown into
exactly.
it yet.
Never skip leg day.
But yes, for an extremely expensive knife, we didn't get the most perfect one out there, and I have seen some other YouTube reviewers that have demonstrated absolutely bang on ones, and some of them have been donated by the manufacturer, which leads me to believe that maybe there was some QC check and us just getting a random one that we get to play with. Maybe you are going to notice things more often like that. Just a heads up to maybe check one in person before you purchase it.
And less than a millimeter difference off center is normally not a big deal for a knife, but when it's this kind of cost,
Yeah.
it's kind of a big deal.
This is nearly $300 on that guy, and that's not an inexpensive knife.
No.
So yeah, before we jump into our reviews, we would just like to take the time to thank the Cutting Edge for letting us play with this knife and do a review for it for you guys.
Yeah, really appreciate them letting us borrow it.
Because it's too damn expensive for us to afford on our own.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Not that we don't try.
and I don't think we're quite in the right circle to start getting the rotation of review knives that are out onto that small little knife review channel type of thing going on, right?
Not yet. Eventually, though. Maybe.
We'll make do. Cutting Edge lets us do it. So
Thank you, Cutting Edge.
Indeed, indeed. So on to the grades. Let's go, Dennis.
all right, so I ended up giving it a 77, which I believe is a B minus. Really, really liked the knife overall. Actually, way more than I thought I was going to. High points for me were definitely material choice as well as the actual ergonomics. I loved it. There was no hot spot here. I know Nigel with his bigger hand, but he's got a finger that covers all of this space.
That's true.
So yeah, for me, every time I picked it up, I absolutely loved it. The low points were actually the pocket ergos. Nigel and I both on the same train of the one-way pocket clip, and there's two left-handed guys sitting here. So we didn't dabble that on the cons, but I will definitely make that a big con for me. I scored it a 6 for that. Also, honestly, aesthetics. I don't think this is an appealing knife. I think it's a classic Spyderco that looks awesome as long as you don't look at it. Like it's, or feels awesome. Sorry, not looks awesome.
See, I thought you were just being cheeky, but I still agree with both ways of putting that.
I mean, it is Spyderco.
So
Part and parcel of kind of the whole company shtick.
yeah,
Yeah,
Joe,
sure.
do it up, man.
Objectively, really great knife. There's enough bothering me about it that it kept down to 7s across the board, except for lockup and actuation. The action on this knife is great.
So what was your actual score?
Oh, sorry. Total was 69 points, making it a C.
Cool.
If you're in love with the design, sorry, yeah, normally I'm better about that. If you do like the design and it feels good in hand, then yeah, you should get it. But for me, there's enough nitpicky shit that I'm just like, I can't bring myself to get super excited about it. Low points for me, honestly, were on the personal side of things. The lowest of which was ergonomic preference. I really don't like this knife in hand, and that's a difficult thing for me to say because most knives feel great to me. So, but just the weird taper, just something about it. Maybe I'd grow to like it, but over the last couple days of playing with it, just...
And just to point out, wasn't aesthetics lower than...
sorry, yeah, aesthetics was the low point. Yeah, I also think it's hideous.
We had chatted about that earlier, and it's a gross looking knife.
Yeah,
Peter Rassenti, you make a pretty utilitarian knife, but Jesus, man.
Yeah, I gave it a 4. It looks so mismatched. I know we said it a few times, but the blade by itself, fine. The handle by itself, great. But it looks like you copy and pasted 2 different knives together.
A little bit, yeah.
The lines don't really flow together in a way that I find personally pleasing. Again, this is very subjective, but for me, it didn't connect. Yeah.
So I think this is my first time actually doing our, proper scoring system and not just rambling for the better part of 2 hours.
Yeah.
The high points for me were the pocket ergonomics and the aesthetics. Like
Once again,
Weirdo.
what did you score it?
Oh yeah.
77.
Which is a letter grade.
I believe I tied it with you.
Correct,
Is that
sir.
a B minus?
That is a B
B
minus.
minus. So, as much as this is a wonky looking knife, I still think it's quite beautiful.
Just keeping in mind
Weirdo.
that this is what he brought to the table today.
Yeah.
So,
Weirdo.
just keep that in mind.
I got weird taste, okay?
Also, keep in mind he's the only one at the table wearing glasses.
I am.
Does that have something to do with it?
I'm
Poor
slightly
eyesight.
blind.
Gotta update that prescription.
Oh,
I mean, this is an orange blob, right?
you and your blobs.
But no, in the pocket, I understand that the non-reversible element is huge for
Lefties.
less huge for me, although I do actually sometimes carry wrong-handed, as it were. But as it were. I mean, I do it, so it can't be that wrong. And okay, I'm a huge fan of sheep's foots. Every single thing about this handle I love. Visually speaking, I just love it. It actually reminds me a lot of the Shurgorov Neon Light. Just every
yeah.
single element of the curves and the milling, just I look at it and it makes me happy. Like, I look at this, makes me happy. I look at that, it makes me happy. I look at the little thing here, makes me happy.
What was your low point?
The low point, oh damn it, my phone turned off. The low point was definitely the ergonomics.
Okay.
That was the lowest point for me. Everything else was kind of medium, because like, it's a nice knife and I like it a lot, but for that cost, I couldn't rate it any higher than I did.
I think this is definitely Spyderco capitalizing on something good that they've got rolling, and this being kind of a pinnacle of like, let's see if we can do it just because we can get away with it type of thing.
Yeah. And as per usual, I'm the hater. I'm critical on knives, and yeah, I ended up giving this guy a 64, which was a D.
See, and that's funny because it's actually not that far off from my final score.
Yeah. As far as the objective side of it went, the lowest I gave was a 7 for the cost versus materials. It's kind of stretching the ballpark for the price range, but then considering the one-piece integral machining for the handle and stuff, it's...
The time spent on that knife has got to be quite high. So,
But it's definitely still asking a lot for what it is, I think.
yeah.
I was going to add something to Nigel's hypercritical score. Before recording, we actually do talk about what all of our scores are going to be. And I will call someone out if they've got like a crazy score and I'm like, just how can you justify it? And if they can, I'm like, cool, leave it at that score. But there's always a coming to terms of like, why did you, can we all justify the scores we've got before we come to it? And so even at a 64, I looked over Nigel's things and I'm like, I can't argue with anything that Nigel's put up on the score sheet.
Yeah.
Like, there's no contention on anything for this one.
Yeah, and yeah, like I said, like it did really good on objective. It was 8s across the board, except for the cost versus materials. Personal side is where it lost, and especially for the enthusiasm, is instantly when I saw the knife and pictures of it, I could get the sense of that awkward misbalance
The ratio.
in the ratio. Yeah, so I actually gave it a 2 for the enthusiasm,
Yeah.
because once getting in hand, that reinforced what I thought was going to happen, and it knocked it down a little bit again there.
That's fair.
Yeah. High point during the personal was the material choice, because one-piece titanium and S90, those are great materials.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of a good representation of all four of us there, I think.
Our thoughts and feelings into this particular Spyderco.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not a bad knife, but yeah, if you've watched the channel for a while, you get a sense that we're picky on things. So yeah.
It's the 7 in the 100 spot that's the issue.
It's
It's
I think
polarizing.
I think a lot of it comes down to the aesthetics of this knife too. When we're talking about how much we were excited about it or not, it really is a love-hate, and you're either going to love the way that this knife looks or you're going to hate it, and that might be a make or break for everyone.
Very much so. So yeah, if you guys can get a chance to play with one of these and check them out, at least just for the action, because it is beautiful to play with.
So
if nothing
nice.
else, if nothing else, a design well executed.
Indeed.
Drop shutty, and Spyderco's not known for drop shutty.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
So yeah,
On that note,
beautifully made knife. So yeah, definitely check it out and see what you think of it yourself. And yeah, that's what we have to say on that guy. Nigel the Smith, signing out.
I am who I am. I'm Dennis Vipers.
I am the Iron Joe.
I'm Morgan at Stanoa.
And we will catch you again next time.
We don't need bigger knife. Yeah.